Welcome. You are listening to Humans of Mitti Ke Rang, and today we are in conversation with Mr. Edward Yee from Singapore. He is the co-founder of GIVFUNDS. Tune in to know more about his organization and his journey as a social entrepreneur. Get to the question.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So, Edward, please tell us about GIVFUNDS.
Sure. So GIVFUNDS, we're a non-profit impact fund, and we were started slightly more than 3 years ago, with really the idea of helping small to medium-sized social enterprises bridge a funding gap, more specifically known as the Pioneer Gap. It really started a couple of years ago when I was traveling across South and Southeast Asia. My journey actually started in Bangladesh, where I was doing a program on social enterprises and social businesses with Professor Yunus from Grameen Bank. And from there, I had the opportunity to really stay with social entrepreneurs, whether they're working in farms, whether they're working in villages, whether they're working in slums. And I really saw these incredible businesses which were changing thousands of lives and were profitable, but somehow weren't able to gain access to resources to scale. And it really, really puzzled me. And this kind of just continued over the next couple of months as I traveled across Southeast Asia, and eventually ending up in India. And the same problem kept happening, and it just didn't make sense to me. Why the people who were doing the most for other people, the most for humanity, weren't getting the resources needed to do it. So it was on this journey that I met Amit, as well as my co-founder, Irwan. So Amit's the founder of MKR. And we met on Jagriti Yatra. It's a 16-day journey across India where you kind of stop by and visit some of the largest social enterprises and nonprofits in the country. And I think when I met Irwan, I think we really saw things the same way. We saw very much the same problems which social enterprises was facing, and started GIVFUNDS with really that idea. How could we help these incredible change makers really, fulfill their potential, create a kind of impact and change which would affect thousands more, and really help them to scale their incredible businesses.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And was being an entrepreneur always something that you wanted to do?
To be honest, no. To be honest, I still don't want to be an entrepreneur. It's tough. It's a tough journey. It's just and there's a lot of times when you're very scared of failing. You deal with failure every single day. I think what made me become an entrepreneur was because I saw a problem which just wasn't being solved, and no one was bothering about it, or no one could see it. And I think I had the duty to kind of step up to do it, to solve that problem. To a large extent, it's also because I think the universe aligned in many ways. And there's a lot of things which happened along the way which kind of brought me to the point where it's like, if it's not me, there's no one else going to solve it. And I have to do it.
Great. So my next question to you is, I read somewhere that you were dyslexic as a child, and you say that has really helped you grow into the person that you are today. So if you could tell us more about that.
For sure. So I don't think any kid really appreciates being dyslexic because it just makes school very, very difficult for you. But I think over the years, I really saw the strengths in it, and I understood myself and my dyslexia a lot better. So I understood where I could really use its strengths as leverage points and to navigate around my weaknesses. And I think largely I've been able to set up my life like that. So things like, for example, I'm very bad at remembering details, but big picture thinking is something which dyslexics really strive at. And I think being able to balance both worlds in that way, and really using that, big picture thinking to create structures around my life in order to remember the small details was something which I did, and learned how to utilize. Yeah, I think some of the best entrepreneurs are dyslexic. I mean, you look at Steve
Yeah,
Jobs, Richard Branson, they're all dyslexic because I think being dyslexic means you think in a very different way. You see solutions in a very different way as well.
absolutely. And so before I move forward with my questions, I would just like to tell our viewers if they have any questions, please go ahead and comment them down and we'll get to them. My next question to you is you, as you said, you have traveled a lot. So, what have been your best travel memories and what have you learned from all this traveling?
So I think traveling really helped me find myself. Not really through traveling itself, but really through the people I met along the way, and the stories I kind of picked up along the way. I mean, they're really the insane, unforgettable memories. Like, so when I was in Bangladesh, I was on top of the train in Bangladesh, and um, the conductors weren't very happy that me and my friends, all of us, a bunch of foreigners, were on top of the train. So they literally stopped the train in the middle of nowhere and called in the cops, for example, um, to making friends with locals in Mexico, and you know one of them happened to live in a cartel village, but I didn't know it at the time. He invited me to his village to have a party, and I went there and I realized that that's an area which is cartel controlled and police just don't dare to enter. I mean, there were these high points and things which really stuck in my head, but I think more than anything else, I think it's really the lessons I learned along the way, which
Mhm,
it really made me who I am today. One example was in Vietnam when I was traveling and I was eating noodles by the roadside in a roadside store, and um, a transgender sex worker actually came up to approach me, and as many of them do, they do that for business in
mhm,
many countries in Southeast Asia. But I ended up talking with her, and somehow or that other we kind of became friends, and she invited me for beers with her friends. And I don't know what went into my head at the time, and I just agreed. So I went with her and like seven, eight of her other colleagues who were like also sex workers to like a local beer stand, which is really shady with fluorescent lights and all of that. But I think what was beautiful was that before that, I just thought of these people as either people to avoid or people to help. And they really needs help. I didn't really see and empathize with beneficiaries or people like that in a very different way, in a very human way to understand them. Um, that opportunity really changed that. I think I spent like 3, 4 hours just drinking beers with them and talking and hearing their lives. And they have their own dreams, they have their own families to talk about. They also told me a bit about their stories, and yeah, they're heartbreaking and all, but so, like many of them were forced into the sex trade, for example.
yeah,
But there was so much more than just you know how these individual incidents affects their lives, and there's so much more than just their labels. And I really managed
mhm.
to empathize with like you won't even believe, like they bought me, they treated me the beers at the end of the day. I didn't pay a single thing. I mean, I'm way more fortunate than them, and yet at the same time they were so willing to open their arms and to share with me their stories. And I guess when I was traveling again and again, I really felt that. In whichever country I go to, you really feel that warmth when you really connect and talk to people in a very different way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a great story. And so tell us more about your trip to India. What else did you do? Where else did you go?
So I think to date I've been to, I think, 16 states in India, something like that.
Wow.
But I think the very first trip was really for Jagriti Yatra.
Hmm.
I guess that kind of cheats because I think I covered like 8 or 9 states in a short 15, 16 days.
Uh-huh.
But I think it was really beautiful as well. It really opened up my my eyes to India. I've never been to India before that trip. But during that trip, when you go to villages, when you go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, when you interact with people from all stratas of society, all sectors, all interests, in all areas in India. I mean, you have people from the Seven Sisters, you have people from Bihar, UP, from the South, and Kerala, and getting really close and bonded with them through living in a sleeper non-AC. That's, I think, something which really changes your perspective on things. I must admit though, like the first day or two, I was really uncomfortable. I mean, it's
I
like
can
8
imagine.
people, and like everyone's just very used to kind of sticking near you and all. But I think after a while, I really started to appreciate it and really start to love it.
Amazing. And so for our Indian viewers, we would like you to share more about your country and what do you think is the beauty of your country? Hello?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. No, I think you skipped for a little. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So for our Indian viewers, we would really appreciate if you could tell us more about your country and what you think is the beauty of your country.
For sure. I'm from Singapore, and I think we're a small red dot, 4 or 5 hours from India, depending on where you come from. Maybe slightly longer. And I think we have a pretty significant Indian origin or significant population made from from people of Indian origin, mostly from the south. I think what's beautiful I think about Singapore is really our multiculturalism. We really grow up celebrating um, different holidays and really celebrating these holidays with each other. We celebrate Diwali, we celebrate Eid, we celebrate Christmas, Chinese New Year, really all together, right
Mhm.
from school. And in school, we'll celebrate all of this. Um, because of that, you really have a huge diversity in food, for example. Uh, I don't think I've been to another country which has the same kind of diversity in food as we do, because you have food from Southeast Asia, you have food from like China, you have food
Mhm.
from India, you have food from the West. I think it's really that melting pot of people and food and cultures which really is what makes Singapore unique. Um, yeah, we are. Besides that, we're quite stereotypical. People say we're very clean, very safe, and I do appreciate all those different traits as well. I also think that we're really blessed, especially
Mhm.
within the wider context of Southeast Asia or South Asia. And I think we've been really blessed with really good governance over the years,
Mhm.
um, which has allowed us to really thrive very well.
Beautiful. And coming back to your work, um, do you have an inspiration that someone that inspires you to take the path that you're taking right now?
I think who constantly inspires me in GIVFUNDS are really the social entrepreneurs which we support. I think that the individual stories are just mind blowing altogether. And when I look at the work they're doing in the communities they're working in and how much they've given up to be there just to serve, it makes me feel like I haven't done enough and that there's so much more I could do to help them achieve more and to really fulfill
Mhm.
them their full potential. I mean, we have social entrepreneurs like Elena, and she's been working in Tihar prison for the past, I think, 3 4 years now, and she's been the only woman in the entire wing, and that's in Tihar. We have social entrepreneurs like Yamuna, and she works with auto drivers in Bangalore, and I think every year she files about 20 to 30,000 tax returns for these auto drivers so they can gain access to financial services. Um, we have the we have a whole bunch of really inspiring social entrepreneurs. And I think their work always inspires me all day.
Amazing. On this note, we have a couple questions from Amit.
Sure.
Uh, he asked, one, how was your experience studying in Oxford?
Unfortunately, I'm back in Singapore now, so I'm no longer studying there, largely because of COVID. Oxford's really, really interesting. I'm doing a graduate program in Oxford,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm doing the MBA next year. And I think what was really unique about Oxford and my experience there was that there were, I guess, the community I was surrounded in or immersed in was a community of change makers and people who were really committed to creating change over the next, decades of
Mm-hmm.
their lives. And they're from very different fields, from governance to business to the NGO space to international relations to multilateral organizations. And what it opened my worldview to different forms of change. It opened my worldview to different forms of impact. I really do treasure and value the community which I've been fortunate to be around in Oxford. And I think that's really what I would say is my greatest takeaway. I mean, to be honest, the lessons and the teaching, I think you can get it anywhere. It's really not that good. In fact, anything else, the teaching pedagogy is pretty backward because it's Oxford, it's so old and traditional. But I think it's really the community you have there, as well as the history which you have around you staying in a place. I mean, every day you walk past buildings which are hundreds of years old. They have their own
Mm-hmm.
really, really interesting traditions and cultures. For example, there's this one college, I think, at the change of daylight saving time every year, they will walk backwards around the quad or like a courtyard for about an hour, for the entire hour, so that they can preserve the space-time continuum, which is like really strange and weird behaviors. But I think it's within those behaviors, it's within those culture. I mean, within those traditions, alongside this community of people who are kind of taking a hiatus off the rest of the world, kind of coming into this bubble, and to really reevaluate how they want to live a life of meaning that
Mm-hmm.
that you gain something out of it.
Yeah. And we had another question. Uh, what was your experience backpacking in the Silicon Valley and other parts of the US?
um, I think what I enjoyed the most about the US, traveling around the US, was really the national parks. I think the national parks were much more uh, developed than most other places, and because of it, it makes it a very enjoyable experience just walking and hiking. I think I've been to 12 national parks or something, but still a fraction of how much they have. So I do want to go back to hike the national parks again someday. Um, yeah, but besides that, I mean, I personally felt that the Bay Area was a little overhyped compared to um, compared to how most people perceive it. I mean, there was innovative things going on there. There was startup culture and everything, but it felt like a lot of people were very transient there. Um, I think what I really enjoyed was backpacking in places like Latin America or Central America or across Southeast Asia, where you really feel the warmth of people. And I guess I was also really fortunate to be able to stay with friends in many of these places, and see how they live life and really immerse myself in all these experiences and these cultures. I think I learned far more there than traveling the states and going to like Miami or New York or whatever. Um, yeah,
Lovely. And coming back to GIVFUNDS, last couple of questions from me. What is
sure.
your vision that you have for yourself and for GIVFUNDS?
I think for us it's about, and for myself it's about how I can use my talents and and all the resources which I've been fortunate to get to create
Mm-hmm.
change and to create an impact. Not to be remembered, but really because I guess being how fortunate I am, and having seen the things which I've seen, I owe some sort of duty to help enable these change makers and these people who are doing the incredible work on the ground but otherwise unacknowledged. And I think that really for us is what drives GIVFUNDS. We're very impact driven, we're very focused on change makers and how we could best support them. I think personally, between GIVFUNDS and I, both, I think we're moving towards systems change. How can we change the behaviors of systems in order to help provide more resources to these change makers on the ground, especially in a time like this in COVID, where a lot of these social entrepreneurs or even founders of nonprofits are really overstretched on the ground. They're doing a lot to combat the suffering which is happening, and to really try to help those, even if they might not have, even if their own organizations might not be able to gain access to resources or funding for the next year or so, especially as a lot of funds is moving into either PM cares or for immediate relief. Yeah.
Right. And so what, as you said earlier, being an entrepreneur is tough, and you have a lot to learn in your journey. So what are some words of advice you would like to give to other people hoping to become social entrepreneurs one day?
I think it's really finding your why. I think among some of the most incredible social entrepreneurs I've met, it wasn't about a business idea which got them going. It wasn't an opportunity which landed on their lap. It wasn't because they thought being a social entrepreneur was sexy or whatever that is. I think what really made them stick it out over the years and through all the difficult times was really because they knew why they were doing what they were doing. And they found motivation and purpose in that every single day. And I think that's really the first step of social entrepreneurship. It's not because it's a sexy journey, because I can tell you it sure as hell isn't. I wouldn't want to become a social entrepreneur ever again. But I mean, it is what it is. And if you have a problem which you can't sleep on, and you are already, which just keeps you awake, keeps you driving, and you need to solve it, I think when you find that why, most things can be overcome as an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Absolutely. Really well said. And with that, I come before we end the session for today. If you could share with our viewers how they can get in touch with you, know more about you and your journey and about GIVFUNDS, how can they do that?
Sure. You could find us at GIVFUNDS on our website. So that's GIVFUNDS.org or .com. Alternatively, you can feel free to drop me an email as well. And that is Edward E. So that's EDWARDYEE at GIVFUNDS.org.
All right. And with that, we reach the end of today's session. Thank you so much, Edward, for joining us and sharing your story with us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure sharing and talking with your viewers.
Good night. Please stay safe.
Good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.